Take a look at this rock. Grayish brown, kinda greasy looking, nothing special. You could hold it in your hand and throw it in your backyard. But light a match to a piece of this rock and it will actually catch fire. This is oil shale, and there is so much of it buried beneath southwestern Wyoming that the U S Geological Survey has estimated the region holds over 1 trillion barrels of oil. Not a typo. 1 trillion. That is more oil sitting in the ground beneath one American state than the combined proven reserves of Saudi Arabia and Russia, and yet almost none of it has ever been pumped. Not one major well is running today. So why is America sitting on top of what might be the largest untapped energy deposit on the planet and doing almost nothing with it? To answer that, we have to look at what is actually in the ground. This isn't local folklore or promotional hype from oil wildcatters. The physical reality of this resource is documented in over a century of government mapping and hard scientific data overseen by the United States Geological Survey. The deposit is called the Green River Formation, a massive geological unit stretching across portions of Colorado, Utah, and southwestern Wyoming. Within this formation, federal assessments have identified roughly 1.4 to 1.5 trillion barrels of oil locked inside the rock. But the heart of this deposit lies in Wyoming's Greater Green River Basin, which by itself accounts for more than 1 trillion barrels. To put that scale in perspective, the entire world's proven conventional oil reserves, everything in Saudi Arabia, Russia, the United States, and every other producing nation combined, total about 1.7 trillion barrels. Wyoming's single basin holds the equivalent of nearly 2/3 of the world's total proven reserves in stone. This inventory is not a guess. The survey built its assessment on an enormous physical archive. Geologists have analyzed thousands of core samples and drilling records, backed by tens of thousands of Fisher assays, a standardized laboratory test that heats crushed rock to measure exactly how much liquid oil can be extracted. Specifically, these data underpinnings rely on systematic testing from 186 core holes and 240 rotary drill holes. The science is clear. The oil is physically there. But the geology introduces a stark distinction that changes everything. There's a vast difference between oil in place and a commercially viable reserve. While nobody disputes that 1 trillion barrels of hydrocarbons reside in these hills, the real dispute is profitability rather than existence. 50 million years ago, during the Eocene epoch, southwestern Wyoming looked nothing like the high desert country of today. Instead, it was dominated by Lake Gosute, a massive, shallow inland sea surrounded by warm, subtropical forests. This lake was teeming with microscopic algae. For millions of years, countless generations of these organisms bloomed, died, and sank to the lakebed. They mixed with fine, mineral-rich silt, forming a thick organic mud that eventually hardened into a rock called marlstone. Deep underground, this biological debris began its transformation. In conventional oil fields, organic matter is buried thousands of feet down, where extreme geothermal heat and crushing pressure cook it over millions of years, breaking it down into liquid crude. But the geology beneath Wyoming never finished the job. The sediment was never buried deep enough to reach those optimal oil window temperatures of 150 to 200 degrees Celsius. The natural process was cut short. What remains locked inside the stone is kerogen, a tough, waxy, solid polymer. Think of it as undercooked oil. The biological ingredients are all present, frozen in place, but the subterranean furnace shut down before they could liquefy. The energy stayed locked inside stone because the rock remained chemically unfinished. It is a massive hydrocarbon reserve, but one that requires humans to finish what nature started, mimicking millions of years of missing geothermal heat. How do you extract oil that cannot flow? Long before anyone had a commercial answer, the United States government wanted this rock. In the early years of the 20th century, federal geologists fanned out across southwestern Wyoming, mapping the vast, dark bands of shale. They realized these stone vaults held an unmatched energy reserve, even if the technology to open them did not yet exist. Could a nation actually run its modern military on stone? In 1916, President Woodrow Wilson decided it could. With the U.S. Navy transitioning its fleet from coal to oil, secure fuel supplies became a matter of survival. Wilson signed an executive order establishing the naval oil shale reserves, locking away massive tracts of public land. For decades, the shale sat undisturbed, a strategic insurance policy printed in stone. It remained recognized but entirely impractical while cheap, liquid crude flowed freely from conventional wells. That complacency shattered in October 1973. The OPEC oil embargo cut off foreign supplies, triggering panic, endless gas lines, and a 300% spike in global energy prices. America's strategic vulnerability was laid bare. What was once a distant geological curiosity transformed into an immediate domestic emergency, prompting a massive rush of federal and corporate money to at last turn Wyoming's solid stone into liquid fuel. The response to the OPEC oil embargo was swift and massive. Federal leases and corporate dollars flooded southwestern Wyoming, turning a quiet high desert basin into an active, high-stakes build-out zone. Major energy companies poured billions of dollars into the region, buying up land, staking claims, and drawing up blueprints for giant industrial complexes. On the ground, this financial torrent reshaped quiet railway towns almost overnight. Rock Springs and Green River expanded at a speed that local systems could barely absorb. Rock Springs nearly doubled its population in under a decade. Think about what that means for a small western community. How do you house, feed, and support thousands of new arrivals arriving week after week? The surrounding country changed. Trailer parks and temporary housing developments appeared across the sagebrush hills almost overnight, lining the dirt roads with caravans and prefabricated units. Municipal services strained under the weight of the sudden influx. Local schools, suddenly facing a 30% jump in student enrollment, were pushed far past their normal capacity, forcing teachers to hold classes in temporary buildings and mobile homes. Water treatment facilities, sewage systems, and municipal roads became the physical pressure gauges of a giant gamble that suddenly felt unstoppable. But the local momentum was only half the story. The ultimate validation came from Washington. In 1980, the federal government created the Synthetic Fuels Corporation, providing the formal financial scaffolding for this rush. Backed by billions of dollars in federal loan guarantees and direct price subsidies, the agency designed a safety net for experimental energy development. With the United States Treasury guaranteeing the debt, the project felt nationally backed, secure, and permanent. Local newspaper headlines confidently forecast a domestic oil boom that would soon rival Saudi Arabia. In the crowded bars, local offices, and boardrooms of Sweetwater County, the future of American energy looked clear. The gamble seemed destined to pay off, backed by the full power of the United States government. On the morning of May 2, 1982, the great industrial illusion shattered. The day became known across the region as Black Sunday. With no advance warning, Exxon abruptly announced the immediate total shutdown of the Colony Oil Shale project, the multi-billion-dollar flagship of the entire high desert energy boom. The scale of the collapse was immediate and devastating. More than 2,000 workers walked up to the gates for their morning shifts only to find them locked, with security turning them away. Many crews learned they had been laid off from radio broadcasts while driving to work. Families who had recently arrived in Wyoming, convinced they were starting high-paying, lifelong careers, suddenly faced an immediate crisis with nowhere to turn. The business case had evaporated. Rebounding global oil supply and falling prices wrecked the economics of the project. Almost overnight, extracting fuel from solid stone became an economic impossibility. After the flagship failed, other major regional projects cascaded downward in rapid succession as companies pulled their investments and abandoned their leases. The federal safety nets of the Synthetic Fuels Corporation could not halt the retreat. The shockwaves tore through local communities. In Rock Springs and Green River, the real estate market collapsed. Housing developments that had been rushed to completion sat empty, and residential streets were suddenly lined with for sale signs. Home values plummeted, leaving families trapped with mortgages on properties that had lost most of their value in a matter of days. But the deepest casualty was not the lost capital or the abandoned machinery. It was the belief. The absolute certainty that this rock could support a profitable, permanent industry died on that spring morning. The trillion-barrel resource remained locked in the earth, protected not by a lack of ambition, but by the brutal reality of the balance sheet. The collapse of the 1980s boom was not a simple case of bad market timing. It was a confrontation with basic physics. In a conventional oil field, nature does the hard work. Over millions of years, heat and pressure liquefy organic matter, trapping it in porous reservoirs. When a drill hits that pocket, the oil flows under its own pressure. It is ready to pump, refine, and sell. Wyoming's oil shale offers no such luxury. Because the rock is chemically unfinished, you cannot simply drill a hole and pump it out. You have to mine the stone itself. Early developers had to strip mine millions of tons of solid marl stone, crush it into gravel, and feed it into giant surface ovens called retorts. To force the solid kerogen to liquefy, these retorts had to heat the crushed rock to temperatures exceeding 500 degrees Celsius. Think about the sheer energy required to cook mountains of stone in the middle of a high desert. To get 1 barrel of oil out, you had to burn a significant fraction of the energy you just extracted. The math simply did not work. Then there is the water. Surface retorting is incredibly thirsty, requiring up to 4 barrels of water for every single barrel of oil produced, mainly for cooling and dust control. In southwestern Wyoming's arid environment, where every drop of the Green River is already claimed by ranchers and towns, finding that much water is a legal and physical impossibility. To solve this, modern companies proposed a different approach. Leave the rock in the ground and heat it in place. By drilling electrical heating elements directly into the shale, they can slowly cook the formation underground over months or even years. But this underground method does not escape the laws of thermodynamics. Running high-powered electric heaters deep in the earth for years demands massive amounts of electricity. Water budgets remain a tight constraint at scale, and the financial risk is staggering. Investors must pour hundreds of millions of dollars into power grids and drilling operations, then wait years before the first drop of oil ever reaches the surface. In a volatile energy market, that long lead time is a financial death sentence. To understand how a locked resource suddenly becomes viable, look north to the oil sands of Alberta, Canada. For decades, global energy markets dismissed northern Alberta as a geological curiosity, vast, heavy, and economically hopeless. But then, a combination of targeted tax policies and a technological breakthrough called steam-assisted gravity drainage transformed the region. By the 2010s, Alberta's break-even costs fell to $50 or $60 a barrel, turning once useless bitumen into a major global supply. Wyoming shares this exact starting point. Massive, confirmed energy volumes without a proven business model. But the Canadian comparison does not guarantee a similar ending. Alberta had abundant water and stable, long-term government support. In southwest Wyoming, developers face extreme water scarcity, high carbon intensity, and an estimated break-even cost of $80 to $120 per barrel. Comparing the two fields reveals what is possible when technology aligns with price, but it also exposes the real limits. Wyoming is still waiting for its breakthrough, showing that 1 trillion barrels of potential is still just rock until someone invents a way to make it pay. As of 2026, the silence across the Green River Basin remains unbroken. Only a handful of small independent companies are conducting quiet, targeted tests of modern in situ heating methods, confined entirely to isolated private and state lands. None of this pilot activity amounts to meaningful commercial production. Instead, Wyoming's working extractive economy still relies on its traditional heavy lifters: coal, natural gas, and trona. While the massive oil shale deposits sleep, these active trona mines are wide awake, supplying roughly 90% of the United States soda ash from the very same basin. It is a proven, physical industry that pays the bills today. Directly beneath this active, surface-level economy lies the untouched shale, a quiet giant waiting in the deep. Why risk billions on a volatile chemical gamble deep in the rock when conventional minerals are already keeping the lights on? This trillion-barrel question tends to resurface only when global oil prices spike or national security debates return to the front page. Until then, the great American oil reserve remains just a mountain of stone. Today, Wyoming's trillion-barrel giant remains locked in stone, waiting for a key that may never fit. As the global energy transition accelerates, the clock is ticking. Will we ever unlock this mountain of wealth, or is it destined to remain permanently stranded? Subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest secrets.